What kind of man spends a decade carving a home from the wilderness, only to have a clipboard-wielding bureaucrat try to rip it away in a single afternoon? Me? That's who. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this is the story of how I fought for the cabin I built with my own hands, the one the Pineview Homeowners Association thought they could steal. It starts with sweat, splinters, and a dream I refused to let die. 10 years ago, I bought a plot of land in the Oregon backwoods, 5 acres of dense pine and rocky soil, far from the manicured lawns and petty politics of suburbia. I wasn't running from anything. Not exactly, but I was done with the noise of the world. I wanted quiet. I wanted something real. So I built my cabin, log by log, nail by nail, pouring every spare hour and dollar into it. By day, I worked as a cop in a nearby town, upholding the law, keeping the peace. By night, I was a carpenter, a dreamer, shaping my sanctuary. The cabin wasn't just a house. It was my defiance against a world that felt increasingly hollow. The first log went up in the spring of 2013. I was 32, fresh off a divorce that left me with a beat-up truck, a duffel bag of clothes, and a heart bruised but not broken. The land was my reset button. I learned to fell trees, strip bark, and notch logs by hand, teaching myself from old books and older mistakes. My hands bled. My back ached. But every beam I raised felt like a promise kept to myself. The cabin took shape slowly, a single room at first, then a loft, a porch, a stone chimney. I hauled every plank, every nail, every shingle up that winding dirt road myself. Neighbors? There weren't many. The nearest house was a mile away, part of a small, loosely organized community that called itself Pineview. I kept to myself, and they did the same. Or so I thought. By 2023, the cabin was done. Not perfect, but mine. 2,400 square feet of heartwood and hope, with a view of the Cascades that could make you believe in something bigger. I'd sit on the porch at dusk, coffee in hand, watching the sky burn orange and listening to the silence. It was the kind of peace you can't buy, only build. But peace, I learned, is fragile. It started with a letter, slipped under my door one crisp October morning. The Pineview Homeowners Association, it read, had recently expanded its jurisdiction to include my property. They claimed my land fell within their newly drawn boundaries, and my cabin, my blood, my sweat, my everything, violated their community standards. No permit, no approval, no compliance. They demanded I either pay a $10,000 fine or face legal action to reclaim the property. Reclaim. As if I'd stolen something from them. I stood there, letter in hand, staring at the words like they were written in a foreign language. My cabin wasn't just a building, it was a decade of my life. I'd followed every county regulation, crossed every legal T, and dotted every I. My deed was ironclad, my permits framed on the dam wall. But the HOA didn't care about that. They saw an outsider, a loner who didn't play their game, and they smelled blood. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire. They wanted a fight? They'd get one. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just a carpenter. I was a cop, and I knew how to fight dirty when the law was on my side. The next week, I drove to the Pineview Community Center, a squat brick building surrounded by cookie-cutter houses with identical mailboxes. The HOA board was holding a meeting, and I wasn't about to let them hide behind their paperwork. Inside, the room smelled of stale coffee and self-importance. 5 board members sat at a folding table, their nameplates gleaming under fluorescent lights. The president, Karen Whitaker, was everything I'd expected, mid-50s, sharp bob haircut, lips pursed like she'd just tasted something sour. She held court like a queen, her voice dripping with authority as she lectured a nervous homeowner about mailbox height. When my turn came, I didn't sit. I stood, boots planted, and held up their letter. "This is my land," I said, voice steady but hard. "I built my home. You don't get to take it because you drew a new line on a map." Karen didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping the table. "Mr. Caldwell, Pineview has standards. Your structure is an eyesore, and your refusal to comply is a threat to our community's value." Value? She said it like my cabin was a blight, like my life's work was nothing but a number on a spreadsheet. The other board members nodded like trained dogs, except for one, Tom Hargrove, a quiet guy with a gray beard who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I caught his eye, and for a split second, I saw something like sympathy or guilt. "You'll hear from my lawyer," I said, turning to leave. But Karen's voice followed me. "We'll do what's necessary, Mr. Caldwell." "We always do." I drove home with my knuckles white on the wheel, replaying her words. "What's necessary?" I'd heard that tone before, on the job, from people who thought they could bend the world to their will. I'd dealt with bullies, thieves, and liars, but this felt different. This was personal. They weren't just coming for my property, they were coming for my life. That night, I pulled out my old police files, the ones I kept in a locked box under the floorboards. I hadn't touched them in years, but I needed to know who I was up against. Pineview's HOA, it wasn't just a group of nosy neighbors. They had money, lawyers, and a reputation for getting what they wanted. They forced out other landowners before, using fines and lawsuits to choke them until they sold. But I wasn't some retiree or weekend homesteader. I was a cop, and I'd spent years learning how to read people, how to find their weaknesses. Karen Whitaker didn't know it yet, but she just picked a fight with the wrong man. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching under tires. A black SUV rolled up my driveway, its polished chrome glinting in the dawn light. Karen Whitaker stepped out, clipboard in hand, flanked by a man in a cheap suit who carried a surveyor's tripod. They didn't knock. They just started pacing my land, pointing at my cabin like it was a crime scene. I grabbed my badge from the kitchen drawer, not the one I wore on duty, but the spare I kept for emergencies. It felt heavy, like it carried the weight of every choice I'd ever made. I stepped onto the porch, badge in one hand, coffee in the other. "Morning," I called, voice calm but laced with steel. "Care to explain why you're trespassing?" Karen's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "We're documenting violations, Mr. Caldwell. Your structure lacks proper permits, and we're ensuring compliance." The surveyor avoided my eyes, setting up his equipment like a man who knew he was on the wrong side of a fight. I held up my badge, letting the sun catch the metal. "I'm a police officer. My permits are in order. You're on my property without permission. That's a crime." Karen's smile faltered, just for a second, but she recovered fast. We have authority from the HOA, and we've notified the county. You'll be hearing from them. She turned on her heel, the surveyor scrambling after her. As their SUV peeled away, I knew this was only the beginning. I spent the day digging. Not dirt, but information. As a cop, I'd learned how to work the system, public records, property disputes, old case files. Pineview's HOA had a history of strong-arming landowners, but they'd never gone up against someone like me. I found their bylaws online, a dense document full of jargon about aesthetic harmony and community vision. Buried in the fine print was a clause about boundary expansions, but it required unanimous consent from affected property owners. I'd never been contacted, never signed anything. They were bluffing, banking on me folding under pressure. But I also found something else, a lien on a neighboring property, filed by the HOA against Tom Hargrove, the board member who'd looked uneasy at the meeting. It was dated 6 months ago, for $15,000. Why was Tom still on the board if they were squeezing him? 2. That evening, I drove to Tom's place, a modest ranch house with a sagging fence. He answered the door in a flannel shirt, his beard flecked with sawdust. "Ethan," he said, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "What's this about?" I didn't waste time. "The HOA's coming for my land." "I think they're coming for yours." 2. His face tightened, and he let me in. Over coffee, he spilled the truth. The HOA had been expanding its reach for years, targeting isolated properties like mine and his. Karen ran the show, backed by a developer named Victor Crane who wanted to turn Pineview into a gated luxury community. My cabin, Tom's farm, they were in the way. Tom had been fighting the lien, but he was drowning in legal fees. "They don't stop," he said, voice low. "They'll bury you in paperwork until you break." I left Tom's house with a fire in my chest. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about a machine that chewed up people's lives for profit. But Tom's story gave me an edge. If he was on the board, he had access to their records, their plans. I needed an ally, and he was my best shot. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the county, citing trespassing and fraudulent boundary claims. I also called in a favor from an old partner at the sheriff's department, asking him to look into Victor Crane. By nightfall, I had a lead. Crane's company had a history of shady land deals, and Karen was his point person in Pineview. They were a team, and my cabin was their next prize. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox." I grabbed my flashlight and gun, heart pounding as I crossed the yard. The mailbox door hung open, and inside was a single photo, a grainy shot of me, standing on my porch, taken from the woods. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "Sell or regret it." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. They were watching me. I scanned the tree line, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing moved, but the silence felt alive, heavy with threat. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat up all night, the photo burning a hole in my thoughts. Whoever sent it thought they could scare me off. They didn't know me at all. The photo changed everything. It wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. I'd faced danger before, on the job, but this was my home, my sanctuary. The next morning, I drove to the station and ran the photo through our database, hoping for fingerprints or a lead on the camera. Nothing. Whoever took it knew how to cover their tracks. But I wasn't helpless. I installed motion sensor cameras around my property, hidden in the trees, and started carrying my service pistol even when I wasn't on duty. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. I met Tom again, this time at a diner outside town, far from Pineview's prying eyes. He looked worse than before, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking as he stirred his coffee. "They know I talked to you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Karen called me last night, said I'd regret crossing her." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "Tom, you're on the board. You got access. Give me their financials, their meeting minutes, anything that shows what they're planning." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try. But Ethan, be careful. Crane's not just a developer. He's got connections." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. I'd dealt with men like Crane before, power-hungry, untouchable, until they weren't. 2 days later, Tom slipped me a USB drive at the diner. It was a gold mine, emails between Karen and Crane, bank statements showing payments to county officials, and a draft proposal for a luxury development that included my land and Tom's. They weren't just after my cabin. They were planning to bulldoze half the valley for condos and a golf course. But the real kicker was an email from Crane to Karen. Dated a week ago, Caldwell's a problem. Handle it, or I will. The photo in my mailbox suddenly made sense. Crane wasn't playing by HOA rules anymore. He was playing by his own. I took the evidence to my old partner, Deputy Mike Torres. Mike was a straight shooter, the kind of cop who'd back you up in a firefight but call you out if you stepped over the line. He read through the files, his jaw tightening with every page. "This is big, Ethan," he said. "Bribery, coercion, maybe even stalking. But we need more than emails. We need proof Crane's behind that photo. Or it's just hearsay." I nodded, already planning my next move. I wasn't going to wait for Crane to come at me again. It was time to take the fight to them. The confrontation came faster than I expected. That afternoon, I got a call from a county assessor's office. The HOA had filed an emergency motion to seize my property, claiming I'd failed to respond to their notices. It was a lie, but they had greased enough palms to get a hearing scheduled for the next day. I drove to the assessor's office, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. The hearing room was packed. Karen, Crane, a slick lawyer in a $1,000 suit, and a handful of HOA loyalists. I walked in alone, my badge clipped to my belt, the weight of 10 years of work behind me. Karen smirked as I took my seat, but Crane's eyes were cold, calculating. He didn't know about the USB drive. Not yet. I stood to speak, holding up the drive like a grenade. "Before we start," I said, voice carrying across the room, "I'd like to submit evidence of fraud, bribery, and illegal surveillance by the Pineview HOA and Victor Crane." The room went silent. Karen's smirk vanished, and Crane's face turned to stone. I handed the drive to the assessor, a gray-haired woman who looked like she'd seen it all. "This includes emails, financial records, and a threat I received 2 nights ago, photographed on my property." I turned to Crane, locking eyes. "Care to explain why you're so interested in my land?" Victor, the lawyer, started to object, but the assessor held up a hand. "Let's see what's on that drive," she said. For the first time, I saw fear in Karen's eyes. The hearing room felt like a pressure cooker. Every eye on the assessor as she plugged the USB drive into her laptop. I stood there, heart pounding but steady, watching Karen and Crane exchange glances like cornered animals. The assessor's face gave nothing away as she scrolled through the files, her glasses reflecting the screen's glow. Finally, she looked up. These are serious allegations, Mr. Caldwell. We'll need time to verify this evidence, but I'm halting the seizure motion until further notice. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the assessor cut her off. Ms. Whitaker, you'll have your chance to respond. For now, this hearing is adjourned. The room erupted in murmurs as I walked out, feeling Crane's stare boring into my back. I bought time, but I hadn't won yet. That night, I sat in my cabin, the USB's contents copied to a secure cloud drive. The cameras outside hummed softly, their red lights blinking in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that Crane wasn't done. Men like him didn't back down, they doubled down. Sure enough, at dawn, I woke to the sound of engines. 3 trucks rolled up my driveway, loaded with construction equipment and men in hard hats. Crane himself stepped out of a sleek black sedan, his suit out of place against the muddy ground. I grabbed my badge and gun, stepping onto the porch as the workers began unloading. "What the hell is this?" I called, my voice cutting through the morning chill. Crane didn't flinch. "Progress, Mr. Caldwell. The county may have delayed us, but we're starting site prep for the development. Your cabin's coming down, one way or another." I held up my badge, my other hand resting on my holster. "This is private property. You're trespassing, and I'll arrest every one of you if you don't leave." The workers hesitated, glancing at Crane. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're one man, Caldwell. You can't stop progress." That's when I heard another engine, a sheriff's cruiser pulling up behind the trucks. Mike Torres stepped out, his face hard. "He's not alone," Mike said, nodding to me. "Victor Crane, you're under arrest for trespassing and suspicion of bribery." The workers scattered as Mike cuffed Crane, who spat curses but didn't resist. Karen wasn't there. She'd sent Crane to do the dirty work. I watched them drive away, my heart still racing. Mike turned to me before he left. "We're building a case, Ethan, but Crane's got friends in high places. Watch your back." I nodded, knowing this wasn't over. Back inside, I checked the cameras. One had caught something chilling, a figure in a hoodie, face obscured, spray painting a message on my shed the night before. Last chance. The war was escalating, and I was running out of time. I called Tom, who sounded like he hadn't slept in days. "They're coming for me, too," he said. "They cut off my water yesterday, claiming I didn't pay the HOA's new utility fee." I told him about Crane's arrest, but it didn't ease his fear. "Ethan, there's something else. I found an old deed in the HOA's files. Your land was part of a larger parcel Crane's company tried to buy 20 years ago. They lost it to your seller, and he's been trying to get it back ever since." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about a luxury development. It was personal for Crane, a grudge that stretched back decades. My cabin wasn't just in his way. It was a symbol of his failure. I spent the next day fortifying my defenses, both literal and legal. I filed restraining orders against Karen and Crane, citing the threats and trespassing. I also reached out to a local reporter, Sarah Nguyen, who'd been sniffing around Pineview's HOA for months. She met me at the cabin, her notebook already half full of questions. I showed her the USB drive, the photo, the spray-painted message. Her eyes lit up. "This could blow the lid off Pineview," she said. "But Ethan, they'll come after you harder once this goes public." I nodded. "Let them. I'm not running." Sarah's article hit the local paper like a wildfire. Front page headline screaming, "HOA scandal, bribery and threats in Pineview." The story detailed Crane's shady deals, Karen's bullying, and the evidence from the USB drive. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls from neighbors. Some angry, some scared, all wanting answers. Pineview's perfect facade was cracking, and I was the hammer. But victory felt hollow when I saw the next threat, a brick through my cabin's window, wrapped in a note that read, "You're done." I called Mike, who dusted the brick for prints but found nothing. "They're getting desperate," he said. "That's when they make mistakes." I wasn't waiting for their next move. I drove to Tom's, hoping to convince him to go public with what he knew. His house was dark, the door ajar. My cop instincts kicked in, and I drew my gun, stepping inside. "Tom." No answer. The living room was trashed, furniture overturned, papers scattered. In the kitchen, I found him, slumped against the wall, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He was alive, barely. "They came for the files," he whispered as I called for an ambulance. "Karen's people. They know everything." I stayed with him until the paramedics arrived, my mind racing. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about power, and they'd do anything to keep it. Tom's attack was the tipping point. The county launched a full investigation, and Mike's team raided the HOA's office, seizing computers and records. Karen went quiet, but Crane was out on bail, his lawyer spinning the arrest as a misunderstanding. I knew better. Men like Crane didn't stop until they were broken. I spent every night at the cabin, sleeping in shifts, my cameras on high alert. The community was splitting, half rallying behind me, half clinging to the HOA's promises of progress. At a town hall meeting, I stood up and told my story, holding up the photo and the brick. "This is what they do to anyone who stands in their way," I said. "But I'm not going anywhere." The crowd was divided, but I saw nods, heard murmurs of support. I wasn't alone anymore. Then came the second twist, the one that nearly broke me. Sarah called me late one night, her voice shaking. "Ethan, I found something in the county archives. Your land is tied to a trust Crane's family set up in the 90s. He claims it was stolen from him by your seller. But there's more. Your ex-wife, Lisa, she was a paralegal for Crane's company back then." My stomach dropped. Lisa and I had split a year before I bought the land, but she'd never mentioned Crane. Was she part of this? I didn't want to believe it, but the coincidence was too sharp. I called her, my hands trembling as I dialed. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but guarded. I didn't know what he was planning. I just filed the papers he gave me. She swore she hadn't known about the land's history, but the doubt lingered, a knife in my gut. I couldn't dwell on it. The final showdown was coming. The county scheduled a public hearing to review the HOA's actions, and I knew it was my last chance to end this. I spent days preparing, gathering every scrap of evidence, Tom's testimony, Sarah's research, the USB drive, even Lisa's reluctant statement about Crane's old deals. The hearing was standing room only, the air thick with tension. Karen and Crane sat at the front, their lawyer whispering furiously. I took the stand, my voice steady as I laid out their scheme, the bribes, the threats, the forged boundaries. I held up the photo from my mailbox, the spray-painted message, the brick. This is my home, I said. And no one, not you, not Crane, not anyone, gets to take it. The hearing room hung on my words. A sea of faces, neighbors, reporters, county officials, watching as I tore into the HOA's lies. Karen's face was a mask, but Crane's eyes burned with quiet rage. When their lawyers stood to respond, he spun a tale of community improvement and regrettable misunderstandings, but the evidence was too damning. The assessor, her voice sharp, announced that the HOA's boundary expansion was illegal, their fines unenforceable. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others shouting in protest. I caught Tom's eye across the room. He was there, bandaged but unbowed, a faint smile on his face. We'd done it. Or so I thought. That night, I returned to my cabin, exhausted but alive with hope. The cameras were quiet, the wood still. I poured a whiskey, sat on the porch, and let myself breathe. Then the phone rang. It was Mike, his voice tight. Ethan, we got a problem. Crane's gone. Skip bail. Left town. And Karen's claiming she had no idea about his plans. My heart sank. Crane was a snake. And snakes don't just vanish, they hide. I thanked Mike and hung up, my eyes scanning the tree line. The victory at the hearing felt hollow now. I'd saved my cabin. But at what cost? Tom was hurt. My ex-wife's name was tangled in this mess. And Crane was still out there, plotting his next move. The next morning, I found a package on my porch. No note. No return address. Inside was a single item, a brass key, old and tarnished, with a tag that read, Pineview, Lot 17. My lot. My blood ran cold. This wasn't over. I called Sarah, who dug into the lot's history. She found it. Lot 17 had been the heart of Crane's family trust, the one he'd lost 20 years ago. The key was a message, a promise that he'd be back. I gripped it in my fist, the metal biting into my palm. I wasn't running, but I wasn't naive either. Crane had resources, connections, and a grudge that wouldn't die. I'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. Days turned to weeks, and Pineview began to heal. The HOA board was dissolved. Karen stepped down under pressure, and the county launched a broader investigation into Crane's company. Neighbors started talking to me, some apologizing, others offering to help rebuild Tom's place. I fixed my window, patched the shed, and kept my cameras on. But the key stayed on my nightstand, a reminder that peace was temporary. I'd fought for my home, and I'd fight again if I had to. Lisa called once, offering to meet, but I wasn't ready. Her role in Crane's past was a wound I couldn't touch yet. Maybe someday. I started teaching locals about their rights, holding informal meetings at the diner. People came, share their stories, fines, threats, dreams crushed by the HOA's greed. It wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about standing up, about saying no to bullies who thought they could own you. Tom joined me when he recovered. His quiet strength, a reminder of why we fought. We weren't heroes, just people who refused to break. The community began to feel like one again. Not a collection of scared homeowners, but a group of fighters, each with their own stake in the ground. 1 year later, I stood on my porch, the Cascades glowing under a September sunset. The cabin was the same, maybe a little weathered, but stronger for it. Like me, the key still sat on my nightstand, a ghost I couldn't bury. Crane was still out there, a shadow in the distance, but I wasn't afraid. I'd faced him once, and I'd do it again. Sarah's articles had sparked a state investigation, and Pineview was changing. New leaders, new rules, a community learning to stand tall. Tom was rebuilding, not just his house, but his life. And we'd become friends, the kind who don't need words to understand each other. I thought about the decade I'd spent building this place, the splinters and scars, the nights I doubted I could finish. It wasn't just a cabin, it was proof that one person could stand against a machine and win. Not because I was a cop, but because I believed in something worth fighting for. The world was still loud, still messy, but here, in this quiet corner of the wilderness, I carved out something real, something mine. And no one, not Karen, not Crane, not 100 HOAs, could take that away. I sipped my coffee, the air cool against my skin, and let the silence settle. The fight had changed me, made me harder in some ways, softer in others. I'd learned that home isn't just a place, it's the people who stand with you, the ones who see your fight and choose to join it. Pineview wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. And as the sun dipped below the mountains, I made a promise to myself, whatever came next, I'd face it the same way I built this cabin, one step, one nail, one day at a time.